You know, there's a kind of silence that doesn't soothe you, but presses down on you. It settles on old furniture, seeps into the carpets, and gets stuck in the cobwebs in the corners you stopped noticing long ago. In my house in a small Michigan town, this silence had been my closest neighbor for 5 years. My name is Frank Carter. I'm 58 years old, a former high school history teacher, and now a professional widower and caretaker of an old armchair. 5 years ago, when my Sarah passed away, the world seemed to fade. The colors vanished, the sounds grew muted, and all that was left was this deafening silence, which I occasionally broke with the crackle of a Johnny Cash vinyl record. His voice, cutting through the static of the old recording, was the only one that understood my state. We were both men in black. Only he sang about prisons and lost love, while I just wore an old gray cardigan and tried to make it to evening. My house was my fortress, my refuge from a world that continued to live, laugh, and change without my participation. The old tube TV on which I watched worn-out westerns with John Wayne. The dusty shelves of detective novels I'd read a dozen times, already knowing who the killer was, but still finding some semblance of order in the ritual. And, of course, the photographs of Sarah. Here she is, laughing at a picnic by the lake. Here we are, dancing at our nephew's wedding. Here she is, holding a tiny flower pot with ochrodnoy of her gardening finds. Her smile was the only bright spot in this gray kingdom. But in my fortress there was a traitor, a small, ginger, fluffy saboteur with insolent green eyes and the appetite of a black hole. His name was Biscuit. I had found him as a kitten a year after Sarah's death, thinking that a living creature in the house might dilute the silence. Oh, how wrong I was. He didn't dilute the silence. He detonated it. Biscuit considered himself not just a tenant, but the rightful owner of this house and, apparently, of my life. This ginger bandit had developed a whole system of manipulation. He could look at me with such reproach, as if I personally owed him a Nobel Prize in physics and a portion of fresh tuna. He learned how to open the bottom kitchen drawer where I kept plastic bags and would rustle them at 3 in the morning, mimicking the sound of the cat food bag. He perfected the art of falling off the couch with such a pitiful meow that I would leap from my chair, thinking he had broken all 4 of his legs, only to find him, whole and unharmed, already sitting by his empty bowl with the look of a victor. But in the last few weeks, his subversive activities had reached a new level. He started staging escapes. Like an old prison warden, I sealed every crack, checked the screens on the windows, but he found loopholes with the persistence of an Alcatraz inmate. And every time, his path led in the same direction, across our backyard, through the hedge, and straight into my neighbor's garden. That flower lady, as I called her in my head. I had never really spoken to her. I'd seen her a few times, pottering around in her flower beds, dressed in bright clothes, looking like an exotic butterfly that had accidentally flown into our sleepy town. I knew her name was Ellen Marshall, and that she, like me, was a widow. But that was the extent of my knowledge, and, frankly, I had no desire to expand it. New acquaintances required energy, conversation, smiles, all the things I had in short supply. I would grumble to myself, searching for Biscuit's ginger head among her lush roses. What's he doing over there? Probably chasing her rare butterflies or trying to mark her precious hydrangeas. My irritation was mixed with a poorly concealed curiosity. Her garden was the complete opposite of my overgrown lawn. Hers was a riot of color, fragrant and teeming with life. Every flower stood in its place like a soldier on parade, yet together they created a picture of delightful, vibrant chaos. Then, one evening, when I had almost resigned myself to my traitor's latest escapade, the cat flap on the back door swung open. Biscuit entered the room with a triumphant air. He was proudly carrying something in his mouth. It was a bright silk scarf. The colors were so dazzling they hurt my eyes: orange, purple, turquoise. There could be no doubt. It belonged to the flower lady. The cat paraded to my armchair, dropped the trophy on my lap, and looked at me as if he had just brought me a pheasant. I picked up the scarf. It smelled of flowers and something subtly sweet, like a summer evening. And in that moment, I knew. Hiding in my fortress was no longer an option. In our town, where news of Mrs. Henderson buying new curtains spread to everyone in half an hour, my possession of a woman's scarf could spawn such rumors that I'd have to emigrate. I would have to go. I would have to return it. And it was all because of this ginger furball who was now curled up on the rug, pretending to be the most innocent cat in the world. I sighed, looking at the scarf. Johnny Cash on the turntable just started singing "I Walk the Line." "Well, Johnny," I muttered, "looks like I'll have to walk the line, too. Straight through the hedge, into the lair of the flower witch." With the scarf clenched in my sweaty fist, I headed toward the neighboring yard. My heart was pounding as if I wasn't going to a neighbor's house, but to a CIA interrogation. Every step on my withered grass echoed loudly in my head. I felt like a complete idiot. A 58-year-old man, a former history teacher, on his way to return a scarf stolen by his cat. It sounded like the beginning of a very bad comedy. Her house was exactly as I had imagined, bright, vibrant, with a perfectly manicured lawn, and a sign by the entrance that read, "Welcome to my garden. Trespassers will be showered with compliments." That sign alone made me uneasy. I preferred signs like "Beware of dog," even if you didn't have a dog. It just felt more secure. I reached the door and froze, gathering my courage. Bees buzzed, butterflies fluttered, and all this floral exuberance pressed down on me with its cheerfulness. I coughed to clear my throat and knocked. The door opened almost instantly, as if I were expected. There she stood, Ellen Marshall. In person she was even brighter than from a distance. She wore a floral dress, and her hair was tied in a messy bun from which a few playful curls escaped. But the most striking thing was her smile, wide, sincere, with little crinkles fanning out from her eyes. "Frank, right?" she asked in a voice so cheerful it made me feel even older and more drab. I nodded, unable to utter a word. My pre-rehearsed script, "Hello, sorry to bother you, my cat seems to have borrowed something of yours," vanished from my mind. Instead, I just held out the scarf to her, like a mute servant. She looked at the scarf, then at me, and her smile grew even wider. "Oh, so my scarf found a new home with you. I was wondering where it had gone." "Thank you for bringing it back." And right then, at that very moment when I should have said something, maybe even made a joke, my body decided to betray me. Trying to take a step back to increase the distance and make my escape, my foot caught on something treacherous and green. It was her garden hose, coiled neatly like a snake by the doorstep. My center of gravity shifted. The world tilted. The next thing I knew, I was hearing the rustle of leaves, smelling damp earth, and feeling utterly humiliated. I was splayed out in her petunia bed like a downed bomber. A laugh came from above me. Not a mean, mocking laugh, but an infectious, bell-like one. I opened one eye. Ellen was standing there, covering her mouth with her hand, but her shoulders were shaking with laughter. "Oh, my goodness," she exhaled, trying to be serious. "Are you all right? I didn't realize my petunias had such a stunning effect." I tried to get up, but only managed to bury myself deeper in the soft soil. My pants were covered in dirt. A leaf was stuck in my hair, and my dignity had committed seppuku. "I'm not a spy," I muttered, for some reason deciding this was the most important thing to say right now. "Just the cat, the hose." "I get it," she said, offering me her hand. "You have a very determined cat, and a very clumsy owner. Come on, Mr. Flowerbed Wrecker, let me help you up." I reluctantly took her hand. Her palm was warm and surprisingly strong. She pulled me to my feet with ease. I brushed myself off, feeling like I was 5 years old again and had fallen off my bike in front of the whole neighborhood. "Would you like to come in for some tea?" she offered, still smiling. "Or lemonade? I have to compensate you for the moral and physical damages inflicted by my garden." 2 Franks battled inside me. The old one, accustomed to his den, screamed, "Run! Run before she makes you pull weeds or discuss varieties of roses." But another, a new and entirely unfamiliar Frank, whispered, "Well, maybe just for 5 minutes. She has a nice laugh." The old Frank won, of course. "No, thank you, I have to go," I mumbled, turning as red as an overripe tomato. "I have to fix my car. Yes, urgently." I turned and, without looking at her, hurried back to my yard, leaving muddy footprints on her perfect path. I was almost running. I heard her call after me, "Say hello to Biscuit for me. Tell him I'm not mad and he's welcome to visit any time." Reaching my house, I slammed the door and leaned back against it, breathing heavily. A failure. A complete, resounding failure. I didn't just look like an idiot, I was one. I peeked into the living room. Biscuit was sitting on the windowsill watching Ellen's house with interest. He turned his cunning face to me and meowed softly, as if asking, "Well, did you make friends?" I shook my head and trudged to the garage, to my old car. I really did need to fix something on it, or at least pretend to. I needed to occupy my hands so my head would stop replaying that shameful moment over and over again. I opened the hood and stared into the labyrinth of wires and tubes, understanding none of it, just like I didn't understand women. And as I stood there, feigning the look of a seasoned mechanic, I saw him. A ginger flash darted from behind the bushes, crossed my lawn, and dived back into the hole in the hedge. Biscuit was returning to the scene of the crime. I realized this wasn't a one-time incident. This was a planned operation, and my cat had just started his game. The next day, still feeling the phantom pain in my bruised ego, I went to the only place where one could get a dose of common sense mixed with the smell of engine oil: Big Joe's Auto Repair. Joe. Big Joe. Thompson was my best and, to be honest, only friend. We'd been friends since high school. He was a huge, boisterous man with perpetually greasy hands and a heart the size of a V8 engine. While I was shriveling in my shell, Joe seemed to be expanding in every direction, filling any space he occupied. He was a fan of barbecue, loud music, and unsolicited advice. I found him under an old pickup truck from where his signature grunts and curses at some particularly stubborn bolt could be heard. "Joe, I need some advice," I said, stopping by the workbench. A creeper rolled out from under the truck, and Joe's greasy but smiling face appeared. "Frankie boy," he boomed, sitting up. "What's wrong?" "Your old jalopy from the 70s acting up again? Or have you finally decided to admit that the carburetor is an invention of the devil?" "It's not the car, Joe. It's the cat." Joe wiped his hands on a rag that had seen better days. "Biscuit, what's that ginger gangster done now? Eaten your vinyl collection?" I sighed and told him everything. About the cat's escapes, the stolen scarf, my visit to the neighbor, the hose, the flower bed, and my shameful retreat. Joe listened intently, and as I spoke, his lips stretched into an ever-widening grin. When I finished, he burst into such a deafening laugh that it seemed even the tools on the walls trembled. "Oh, Frankie, Frankie," he said, wiping away tears. "You fell into her petunias. That's a classic. That's better than the movies." "It's not funny, Joe. I looked like a complete moron." "Nonsense!" He waved it off. "Women love clumsy romantics like you. It shows your vulnerable side. You're not just a grumpy old man. You're a grumpy old man who can fall into a flower bed for a beautiful woman. It's almost Shakespearean." "She's not just a beautiful woman. She's too alive, Joe. Too vibrant. Next to her, I feel like a black-and-white photograph next to a Technicolor painting." Joe grew serious. He stood up, went to an old fridge in the corner, and pulled out 2 bottles of cold beer. He handed one to me. "Listen, Frank, 5 years is a long time. Sarah, she was the light of your life, I know. I remember how she loved to dance. Remember our trip to the lake? She dragged you out to dance right on the sand to that old radio. And you danced like a bear, but you were happy. She wouldn't want you to turn into a hermit who only talks to his cat and Johnny Cash." His words stung. He was right. Sarah had loved life. She would have definitely laughed at the story with the flower bed and made me bake an apology pie and go see Ellen again. "I don't know how to do this, Joe. I've forgotten how to talk to people, especially women." "So, learn again," he exclaimed, slapping me on the shoulder so hard the beer in my bottle nearly sloshed out. "And I have an idea. This Saturday is the fall fair in town. And you know who's running the show there? Your neighbor, Ellen. She's organizing the homemade pie contest." I choked on my beer. "A pie contest? Joe, I can barely boil an egg without it exploding." "What pie?" "It doesn't matter," he declared enthusiastically. "What matters is participating. You'll show up, hang around, she'll see you. It'll be your second chance to make an impression, and this time try to stay away from the gardening equipment." I was about to refuse, to say it was the stupidest idea I'd ever heard, but Joe had already taken out his phone. "Okay, let me sign you up right now. Frank Carter, category apple pie." "Excellent. It's done. No turning back." I looked at him in horror. "Joe, you're insane." "No, Frank, I'm your friend. And I'm not going to let you rust away completely in this garage of yours." He took a big swig of beer. "Now, go home and start practicing, and get that cat under control. He seems to be the only one in your pair with a plan." I went home with mixed feelings. Irritation at Joe's high-handedness fought with a tiny, barely perceptible spark of anticipation. The fair. I hadn't been to the fair in years. I imagined the smell of popcorn, the laughter of children, the sounds of the carousel, and Ellen, smiling, flitting between the stalls. I entered the house, and my gaze fell on the floor by the armchair. There lay a single sock, a bright striped woman's sock. There was no doubt whose it was. Biscuit sat beside it, grooming himself with an air of utmost self-satisfaction. He looked at me, then at the sock, then back at me, and I suddenly understood. Joe was right. This cat wasn't just a petty thief. He was a matchmaker, a small, fluffy, brazen Cupid with claws, and he had just delivered a new invitation, one I could no longer refuse. I picked up the sock. It was still warm. I looked out the window at Ellen's house. "All right, Biscuit," I muttered. "You win. It looks like I'm going to that fair after all. And damn it, I'm going to bake that pie." Saturday morning greeted me with sunshine and a sense of impending doom. My kitchen looked like a flour mill had exploded in it. Traces of my nighttime culinary experiments were everywhere. The first pie resembled asphalt after a bombing. The second was burnt to a crisp. The third wasn't so bad, except I had mistaken salt for sugar. In the end, in desperation, I bought a frozen pie crust from the store, sliced some apples into it, and covered it all with so much cinnamon you could mummify a small pharaoh. The result of my efforts sat on the table, looking suspiciously lopsided, but at least edible. With the pie in one hand and Ellen's sock in my pocket, I set off for the fair. The town square was buzzing like a disturbed beehive. The smell of cotton candy mixed with the aroma of grilled meat, and music and laughter came from every direction. I felt like an outsider at this celebration of life. My goal was the stall with the sign Pie Contest, where I hoped to discreetly leave my masterpiece, return the sock to Ellen, and disappear. But, of course, the universe had other plans for me, and so did my cat. I don't know how he did it. I swear I locked all the doors and windows, but as I approached Ellen's stall, I saw him. Biscuit was sitting on her counter, right next to a magnificent cherry pie, licking his lips like a gourmet. Ellen was standing beside him, laughing and scratching him behind the ears. "Biscuit!" I exclaimed. "Get down from there, you scoundrel!" The cat looked at me, then at the pie, and a devilish glint appeared in his eyes. He swiftly grabbed a huge slice of cherry pie in his mouth and leaped off the counter. "Catch him!" Ellen shouted. And so it began. I, Frank Carter, 58 years old with my own crooked pie in hand, was running across the entire fairground after my cat, who was carrying a piece of someone else's pie in his mouth. It was a surreal spectacle. People parted, pointed at us, and laughed. I ran past the shooting gallery, nearly knocked over the carousel horses, and almost crashed into the fortune-teller's tent. Biscuit, with the agility of a seasoned athlete, weaved between legs, strollers, and hay bales. The chase ended as suddenly as it began. Just as I was about to run out of breath, Ellen, having outrun me, threw her light shawl over the cat with the skill of a cowboy lassoing a calf. Tangled in the fabric, Biscuit stopped and finally released his prize. I walked up, breathing heavily, and leaned on my knees. I'm going to kill him," I gasped. "I'm going to have him stuffed." Ellen laughed, picking up the cat and the piece of pie from the ground. "Don't bother. He's just a connoisseur of fine baking. That's Marge Kelly's pie, by the way. She'll be proud of such a review." She looked at my masterpiece in my hands. "And this, I take it, is your entry?" I sheepishly handed her my creation. She peeked under the foil and smiled. "Interesting texture. Very avant-garde. It looks like a lunar crater." "It's apple," I muttered, pulling the sock from my pocket. "And this? I believe this is also yours." "My little kleptomaniac has been at it again." She took the sock and laughed even harder. "Oh, Frank, you and your cat are the best entertainment this town has had in a decade." And then she appeared. Marge Kelly, the organizer of everything, the local radio station on legs, a woman with the energy of a nuclear reactor. "Ellen, dear, Frank, how wonderful to see you here," she chirped. "I saw your chase. It was delightful. Frank, your pie. We must get it to the judges' table immediately." She snatched the pie from me and placed it on the table next to the other pies, which were as perfect as pictures. My lunar crater looked like a punk at an aristocrat's ball among them. And strangely enough, it was the one that drew everyone's attention. People came up, looked, and chuckled. And when the judges, after tasting a piece, announced that my pie had won in the Most Original Approach to Baking category, I realized the day had fully descended into absurdity. Ellen and I stood aside from all the commotion. She told me her husband had also hated cooking but loved her baking. I told her that Sarah made the best brownies in the world. We spoke of the past easily, without strain, as if just sharing old, warm memories. "You know, Frank," she said suddenly, "there's a dance at the local club tonight, a country night, live music. I love to dance, but I hardly ever go alone since my husband passed." She looked at me directly, without coyness. "Would you keep me company? We can just sit, listen to the music. You don't have to dance if you don't want to." Panic reared its ugly head again. Dancing! Me! A man whose coordination was on par with a drunk rhinoceros. But I looked at her smile, at the way she was holding my criminal cat, and I knew I couldn't say no. I didn't want to look like a coward running from the battlefield again. "I'll come," I said, to my own horror. Her face lit up. "Great! I'll be waiting." She left, and I remained standing in the middle of the fair with a prize ribbon for the most ridiculous pie in history, and the realization that tonight I would face a new level of humiliation. And all of this under the approving purr of Biscuit, who, it seemed, had already received his payment in the form of a piece of pie and was now simply enjoying the show. The evening arrived all too quickly. I stood before my closet in a state bordering on panic. What does one wear to a country night? My wardrobe consisted of old sweaters, jeans, and a few shirts Sarah had bought me for Christmas. I chose the least dreary plaid shirt, hoping it would pass for cowboy style. When I arrived at the local club, I heard the sounds of a fiddle and a banjo. The place was packed. Men in cowboy hats and boots, women in denim skirts and bright blouses. They all glided effortlessly across the dance floor, laughing and stomping in time to the music. I felt like an alien who had stumbled upon a foreign celebration. I saw Ellen at the bar. She was in a simple blue dress, but looked like the queen of the evening. She waved at me, and I walked toward her as if to my execution. "I'm glad you came," she said, and her smile eased my tension a little. We sat at a table, and for a while I felt safe. The music was pleasant, the people around were having fun, and I could just sit, drink my beer, and pretend I belonged. But then the band started playing a slow waltz. "So, ready to take a risk?" Ellen asked, holding out her hand. "It's a slow one. I promise not to laugh." I sighed in resignation and followed her onto the dance floor. "Just a warning," I muttered. "I move like a tractor on a dance floor." "It's okay, I'll be your navigator," she winked. She placed her hand on my shoulder, and I awkwardly put my arm around her waist. We began to move. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The first few steps went surprisingly well. I even started to think that maybe it wasn't so bad, but then I relaxed, and that was my mistake. I lost the rhythm, looked down at my feet to figure out what they were doing, and at that moment I stomped on her foot with all my might. "Ow!" she yelped. "Sorry, sorry." I panicked and, trying to regain my balance, made a sharp move backward. My back hit something on the wall. A deafening, piercing wail erupted. I had hit the fire alarm. The music stopped. Everyone froze. Then the wail was replaced by an automated voice. "Attention, fire alarm. Please remain calm and exit the building." A mild panic ensued. People moved toward the exit, while I stood in the middle of the dance floor, red as a beet with shame. The club owner, a large man with a mustache, ran to the wall and switched off the alarm. Everyone turned and stared at me. Someone snickered, then another, and soon the whole room was roaring with laughter. I was ready for the floor to swallow me whole. But Ellen wasn't laughing. She took my hand, looked me in the eyes, and said, "Well, Frank Carter, you promised to make an impression, and you certainly did. Let's get out of here before they throw us out." We walked out into the cool night air. I couldn't look at her. "Ellen, I'm so sorry. I ruined your evening. I told you I was clumsy." "Stop it," she said softly. "That was the most fun thing that's happened at these dances in years. At least now I have a story to tell my grandkids about the man who danced so passionately he almost burned the club down." We walked to her house. I still felt guilty. "You know what?" she said, stopping at her gate. "If you really want to learn, I can give you a few lessons, right here, in my living room. No witnesses and no fire alarms." I looked at her in surprise. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely. Come over tomorrow. Biscuit can be our judge. By the way, he dances much better than you. I've seen him chase sunbeams." And I did. I came over the next day and the day after that. We put on old records in her living room and practiced. She was a patient teacher. We laughed when I mixed up the steps again or stepped on her feet. During breaks, we drank tea and talked. I told her about Sarah, about how we met in college, about her love for gardening. She told me about her husband, Michael. He had been a musician, played guitar in a local band. He died of a heart attack right on stage during a performance. One of those evenings, as we sat on her couch with Biscuit, as usual, settled between us like the grand prize, he suddenly jumped onto the coffee table and, in a fit of play, knocked over a vase with his tail. The vase fell and shattered. "Biscuit!" I exclaimed, ready to apologize again. But Ellen just smiled. "It's all right. It was just a vase. Michael was always breaking things. He was just as clumsy as you are." We looked at each other, and I realized that something more than just neighborly friendship was growing between us. Something warm and fragile. It was on that evening that she told me about the flash mob. "Marge Kelly is organizing a flash mob for Founders' Day," she said, her eyes lighting up. "We're going to dance in the square to Wagon Wheel. It'll be so much fun. You have to be in it." "Oh, no," I said. "I've had enough of public performances. I'm still not over the fire alarm." "Oh, please, Frank." She looked at me with her pleading eyes. "It'll be our triumph. We'll show everyone how well you've learned to dance. Think how great it will be." And I, without thinking, just to see that smile on her face one more time, blurted out, "Okay." The realization of what I had signed up for only hit me the next morning. Me, Frank Carter, a participant in a dance flash mob. It sounded like the ravings of a lunatic. The next 2 weeks turned into one long dance nightmare. Ellen and Joe became my personal trainers. We gathered in my garage for more space. Joe would blast Wagon Wheel from his car stereo, and Ellen would try to teach me the seemingly simple moves, but my body refused to obey. I mixed up right and left, tripped over my own feet, and waved my arms as if fending off a swarm of invisible bees. Joe laughed until he cried, filming my attempts on his phone. "Frankie, you're magnificent," he'd shout. "You look like a broken marionette. We should send this to a talent show." Biscuit also took an active part in the process. He would dart between our legs, try to catch the laces on my boots, and one time he jumped right onto the speaker, causing the music to cut out abruptly and sending the cat flying into a pile of old newspapers with an indignant meow. "Maybe we should include the cat in the choreography?" Joe suggested. "He's much more graceful than you are." I was on the verge of despair. But then Marge Kelly delivered the final blow. She called Ellen and joyfully announced that our flash mob would be filmed by the local TV channel. The news of television threw me into a state of icy panic. Embarrassing myself in front of the whole town was one thing. Embarrassing myself in front of the entire state of Michigan was something else entirely. That evening I went to Ellen's with the firm intention of backing out. "I can't do it, Ellen. I'm not going out there. I'll embarrass you, myself, the whole town." They'll show this video at Christmas instead of It's a Wonderful Life to remind everyone how not to dance. We sat on her porch, looking at the stars. Biscuit was asleep at our feet. "You know, Frank," Ellen said quietly, "when Michael died, I thought I would never laugh again, and certainly never dance. For the first couple of years, I was afraid to leave the house. I was afraid of music. I was afraid of anything that might remind me of him, of our life. I felt that if I started to be happy again, I would be betraying his memory." She paused, looking off into the distance. And then I realized that by hiding from life, I wasn't betraying him, but myself. Michael loved life. He would have wanted me to go on living. And so I started, little by little. First, I just went out into the garden. Then I baked a pie. Then I went to a dance. Every step was a small victory over fear. And you know what the scariest part is? It's not that you'll fall or look foolish. The scariest part is not even trying. She turned to me. "I'm not asking you to be a perfect dancer, Frank. I'm just asking you to take this step with me. I'm scared too. But when we're together, the fear gets smaller." I looked at this amazing woman who had suffered the same loss as I had, but had found the strength not just to live, but to bloom like her garden. I saw in her not just a neighbor or a friend, I saw inspiration, and in that moment I knew I had to do it. Not for television, not for the town, but for her. And for myself. To prove to that old gray Frank in the cardigan that he was still capable of something. "Okay," I said, "I'll dance, but if I fall, you're falling with me." She smiled. "It's a deal." The day of the flash mob was sunny and clear, but for me it was shrouded in a fog of terror. The town square was packed with people. There wasn't an inch of free space. I saw the local TV crew with a camera on the operator's shoulder pointed right at us. 100 dancers, dressed in jeans and white T-shirts, stood waiting. I was one of them. My heart was pounding in my throat, my palms were sweaty. I saw Joe in the crowd, giving me a thumbs up, and Marge Kelly flitting about with a walkie-talkie like a seasoned general. Ellen stood beside me. She took my hand and squeezed it reassuringly. "Just breathe," she whispered, "and remember, you're the tractor, I'm your navigator." And then the music hit. The first chords of Wagon Wheel made the crowd roar with approval. The dancers around me moved as one. I started to move too. Turn, step to the side, clap. I was so focused on not messing up that I probably looked like a robot with a short circuit. But I was moving. I wasn't falling. The first 30 seconds were a success. I even allowed myself a small smile, and then I saw him. At the edge of the square, at the cameraman's feet, sat Biscuit. He was looking right at me. Our eyes met. I went cold. Not this, I thought. Please, just stay put. But Biscuit, apparently, decided the show wasn't spectacular enough without his participation. He saw 100 pairs of feet stomping in unison on the pavement, and probably took it as a personal challenge. He shot off from his spot, and, with a battle cry, charged right into the center of the dancing crowd. People started dodging him. The rhythm was broken. Seeing the ginger torpedo heading straight for me, I instinctively tried to catch him. I lunged, then lunged again, crouched, and spun around, trying to block his path. And in that moment, I realized everyone was looking at me. The music blared, and I, having forgotten all the rehearsed moves, was performing some crazy, improvised dance, trying to catch my cat. And then a miracle happened. The crowd, instead of laughing at me, started to applaud. Apparently, they thought this chaotic dance with an imaginary partner was part of the show, that I was the soloist who was supposed to add a bit of expression to the performance. The cameraman focused the camera right on me. Ellen, momentarily stunned, quickly figured it out. She ran to me, laughed, and joined my crazy dance. She started copying my ridiculous moves, and soon we were both twirling in the center of the square like two lunatics trying to catch a cat who was darting between us, thinking it was the best game of his life. At one point, I finally managed to scoop him up. I lifted him into the air like Simba in The Lion King. The crowd roared with delight. The music reached its crescendo, and Ellen and I, laughing, finished the dance in each other's arms with the triumphant cat in my hands. When the music faded and we stood there, breathing heavily to thunderous applause, I looked at Ellen. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes shining. "I wanted to impress you," I gasped. "Frank," she said, brushing a stray hair from my forehead, "you didn't just impress me. I think I fell in love with your sincerity and with your cat." Our performance, as Joe had predicted, became a viral hit on local social media. The video, titled "Tractor Waltz with a Cat," got thousands of views. Ellen, Biscuit, and I were even invited to the morning show on that same local channel. We sat on the couch, telling our story, and the whole studio laughed when Biscuit tried to steal the host's microphone. But that wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was happening not on screens, but in real life. Ellen and I started dating. For real. Our evenings were now filled not with silence, but with laughter, music, and the aromas of food we cooked together. I learned to bake edible pies, and she grew to love listening to Johnny Cash with me. Her garden and my garage ceased to be two different worlds. They were now one shared space. Biscuit officially received dual citizenship and shuttled between our houses, begging for treats from both of us. He was completely happy. Joe and Marge threw a barbecue party in our honor in my backyard. The whole town, it seemed, came to congratulate that couple with the cat. Joe, handing me a beer, clapped me on the back. "Well, Frankie boy, what did I tell you? That cat deserves a medal. He's the best matchmaker in Michigan history." That evening, after all the guests had left, Ellen and I were alone. The garden was lit by string lights she had hung. I brought out my old record player and put on that same Johnny Cash album. "I want to repay a debt," I said, "for that waltz I ruined." I held out my hand. She smiled and took it, and we danced, slowly, right on the grass, to the gravelly voice of the man in black. I no longer felt like a tractor. I felt like the happiest man in the world. I looked at this incredible woman in my arms, at the stars overhead, at the light in the window of her house. I thought about the long, strange journey I had made from my dusty armchair to this moment. I realized that life after 50 isn't an epilogue. It's not the end of the story. It's just a new chapter. And sometimes, to start it, you just need someone to pull you out of your fortress, even if that someone is a small brazen ginger cat who decides to set you up on a date with your neighbor. And I was eternally grateful to him for it, because that cat didn't just steal a scarf and a sock. He stole my loneliness and gave me back my life.